Los mercados han entrado en esta recta final de año, el último trimestre de un 2025, no sin incertidumbre, no sin desafíos que de momento han ido solventando con buena nota. Ya veremos qué es lo que nos depara este tramo final de un año convulso. Vamos a intentar desvelar algunas de esas estrategias de la mano de Alliance Bernstein. Vamos a saludar a Teresa Keane, Product Director at Alliance Bernstein. Hi, Teresa.
Hello,
Welcome.
good afternoon.
Well, we are coming up to the end of this year. Can you comment on equity markets? What are your impression for this final stretch of the year?
Oh, hello, everyone. Yes, we are indeed coming up to at the end of the year. Equities as a whole actually have bounced back very well, as you well know, from April lows as concerns about tariffs have significantly receded. US monetary easing is underway given the Fed rate cut in September. Inflation is on target. GDP growth is resilient, although by resilience I don't mean strong, I mean less weak. In terms of equities, global in particular, they've come back around 19.8%, as you can see from the chart, actually outpacing the S&P 500. But in terms of the outperformers and the strongest performers, when we look at regional returns, emerging markets have been up 33% almost, followed by European equities. So a significant reversal from last year. And then in terms of style, what we're seeing is that growth is actually outperforming value, certainly over the third quarter. And year to date, the gap is narrower when we look at that, but it's also outperforming quality quite significantly, actually. And what's driving that outperformance is really technology, communication services. Healthcare has been a laggard year to date, as well as consumer and consumer staples in particular. Other industries like technology, or should I say, other industries like industrials and financials, while they performed quite well in the first half, they lagged more recently in the third quarter. So although we've seen a significant bounce back for equities, at the same time, there are still significant uncertainties in the market today. As you know, we still have a very concentrated market in the US. Valuations are still very high. The Mag 7 are trading at a premium. So there is no overall change there. The market seemed to be happy to price in the positive or the short term rather than the long term. So clearly we can't be complacent in a market like this.
You mentioned quality is lagging this year, so far this year. Can you comment on that and which companies are outperforming?
Yes, indeed. Quality has lagged, and quality has lagged the most when we look back over a 20-year time horizon. And if we look in particular at the MSCI World Quality relative to the MSCI World on a trailing basis, you can see in the current environment our quality is lagging in the region of around 10%. And that's actually more than what it underperformed during the COVID pandemic. That's actually quite unusual. Quality is normally a very stable factor, outperforms over the long term. And then on the right-hand side of my chart, you can see that actually speculative growth is doing very well. Again, it's performing most in that over that 20-year period. By speculative growth, we mean those companies that are in the shall we say, bottom for profitability and the bottom 60%. In terms of valuation, they're also in the bottom 60%. But for year-over-year sales growth, they're actually in the top 30%. So the companies that are really outperforming in this type of environment are really companies that have higher beta. So beta maybe of 1.2, 1.3, maybe even higher. Those that are more leveraged and certainly higher volatility. Companies with higher dividend yield and higher profit margins are actually underperforming. So I would say then it's actually not just within any sector or industry that we're seeing this across the board. So within, for example, consumer, also across consumer, financials, and healthcare as well. So within financials, for example, Coinbase is actually outperforming the likes of a London Stock Exchange. We also have CoreWeave, which is a commoditized cloud provider, and it is outperforming arguably the best software company in the world, ServiceNow, for example. I guess other strong performing companies are the likes of Tesla, CVS Health, and an industrial company, for example, Boeing. So these are the types of companies that are outperforming in this type of low quality speculative growth rally. So a market not to be complacent in, even though we're seeing strong performance across the board from equities.
Teresa, what do you think about AI? Are the valuation too high? Probably all that capital expenditure, will all that capital expenditure translate into profitability?
Yes, that's indeed a very good question, and it's a question that's on the minds of many, many people. And it's really important to be able to look under the hood of these companies and actually try and address these questions. Clearly, when it comes to AI, there's a benefit and there are certainly opportunities, but there are also vulnerabilities. And for us on the ground, in terms of research, we have to be able to analyze those companies. Really, simplistically, two questions. What's the value proposition? Does that company have a proprietary data moat? Or are they using publicly available data? If they're using more publicly available data, clearly there's more vulnerability there. And then the second question is really around monetization. Is that company in a sector or industry where it's competing with maybe more AI upstarts? Because then clearly there's going to be more vulnerability there. Or are they a leader in their space already and they're already showing AI monetization, and that's translating into the bottom line? So these are some of the questions that we have to look at on a day-to-day basis when it comes to analyzing these companies. Within quality and within technology, I should add that actually software underperformed significantly. This latest quarter underperformed semis significantly. And that's mainly because the presumption by the market is that OpenAI and the LMs will take over the software industry. Now, we clearly disagree with that, and as an active manager, we're using this type of framework in order to analyze these opportunities and risks as we go forward.
And finally, how are you positioned, Alliance position for the remainder, for the end of the year on 2026?
Well, as I said before, equities have really bounced back from those lows, but it's really important that we are not complacent given the number of uncertainties that there is in the marketplace today. And they're very varied, quite frankly. There are three key themes that we are looking at, and the first one is really around quality. How long is this low quality speculative growth rally going to last? The second one is to your question on generative AI. How are we balancing the risk of a CapEx bubble, for example, with further growth going forward? There has been excessive spending, and how is that going to translate? So it's really important that we're aware of that. And then finally, of course, Trump. What are the downside risks? And also the continued resiliency of the US economy. So those are the three key things that we're looking at as a strategy as we navigate the second half, or shall I say the last month of the year, the last 2 months of the year, and going into 2026. The profile for the US market in particular, when we look at the trailing 24 months volatility ratio, is quite different to the non-US. So as a bottom-up stock picker, we're not making decisions by regions, but we are overweight non-US versus the US. The US market is more risky than non-US. We do continue to see earnings growth of non-US companies actually converging with US as we go into 2026. So as a manager and as an active research manager, as a core strategy, we're actively looking for these quality, stable companies at attractive valuations in order to avoid some of these, risks going forward. In this environment, remaining diversified is really important, not just across asset classes, but but also within the asset classes, within equities, really understanding which strategies are providing that uncorrelated pattern of return, a differentiated pattern of return in order to deliver on that risk profile that's needed for the end client.
Teresa Keane, Product Director at Alliance Bernstein, thank you for your time. Thanks for your market vision, for sharing your market vision in Negocios TV.
Thank you very much appreciated. Bye-bye, thank you.
Las tácticas, las estrategias de cara a esta recta final del año en la que los mercados parece que han capeado bien el temporal. Ya veremos qué es lo que nos depara este último trimestre y también el foco puesto en la industria de gestión de activos en el 2026.